Hey everybody, just wanted to do a quick video on working with text files in LabVIEW. And this isn't just specific to text files, this kind of covers any sort of ASCII file out there. Really all we need is in the file IO palette in the programming section. There's really only a couple functions we need in most cases, and I'll show you some of the advanced functions that are helpful sometimes as well. But yeah, we have this open, create, replace file. This is what we're going to use to start always. You actually don't have to. Saying always is a little deceiving. The write text file and the read text file, actually, if you can pass in this refnum, and it will change this to accept a refnum. But if you don't, it's expecting a file path. It'll accept either or. I can pass in a path or I can pass in a refnum. So I was a little, not entirely correct to say you always use this because you don't necessarily have to. But if you want to open a reference to a file and, do a whole bunch of operations with it over and over again, you'll want to use this. And then also if you want to control some other characteristics of it. For example, I have this option of whether I want to open a file, replace a file, create a file, open or create, replace or create, or replace or create with confirmation. If I have an existing file on disk that I want to open, I just need to select open. If I want to replace an existing file, there's a file that has some contents in it. I don't really care. I'm just completely replacing it. That's a good option, right? So that way I don't have to go delete stuff out of it and then, reinsert my new stuff or whatever. I can just replace it. And then also I can create a file if there's one that doesn't exist. And then some of these allow you to do stuff like multiple options, right? So open or create. Right? So if that file exists that I pass in the path to, it will open it. But if it doesn't exist, it will create it. So that can be useful sometimes where, maybe that file exists and maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't exist, I want to create it. That's useful for that. And there's also similarly for replace or create, or you can add a confirmation to that. Basically there. And then I also can control the level of access. So whether it's read-write, read-only, or write-only. So if I want to control what this instance in LabVIEW can do, I can do that. There's a file path I can pass in. If I don't pass in a file path, it's going to ask for a dialog. And then buffering, I can disable it or enable it as I want. And then I also can pass in a prompt. So that would be only if I'm using the dialog. So for example, let's delete this. And all right, I'm just going to close that reference out. Let's say I run this. I'm going to get a little file dialog that says, hey, where do you want this, right? Sweet. So that's kind of the opening. And then as you see, I have this close file function. It's just this guy. So this is going to open up this reference. I can pass that reference through as many different things as I want. But when I'm done, I want to close that reference out. And when I'm done, it's also going to pass out the original path of the file. So that's kind of getting started. This is finishing. And then in between, we really only need these write text file and read text file functions. So if I want to write data to the text file, I can pass that in. There is this prompt, but if we're passing in the reference, it's not going to do anything. Similarly to here, if I had passed in a file path, it wouldn't have popped up the dialog, so the prompt does nothing. But if I want to use a dialog here, instead of passing in a reference, I can. And here, I'm going to actually put the text that I want. Let's call it, whatever you want. Demo text. And that's all you can really input, right? So it's just going to write data to that text file. One thing to note, when you open a file, it's going to place the cursor at the start of the file. And so when you write your text, it's just going to start there. As you do like subsequent writes, right? So if I added another write here, it's going to just put the cursor where I left off here, right? So if I wanted to write some more, I can add another thing. But it's basically just going to peg this on right where this stopped. Now, if I wanted to add like a line in between these, I can. I could just do something like, add a, end of line constant or something like that. So you can do stuff like that, and that way, every time I write, it will add a new line to the file. It's up to you depending on what you're trying to accomplish with this file. This will write text. It'll write demo text. It'll move to the next line, and then it's going to write demo text too. Now, if you're opening a file, writing data, and closing the file, when you reopen it and go to write, the cursor is going to be at the start of the file. Just one thing to be cautious of. So it will try to overwrite text that's already there, potentially. Sweet. So there's that. And then for reading a text file, I'm going to close out this. So I'm going to write that text to my file. And then when I'm done, I want to read that file again and get all of the data. So I'm actually going to generate. So this is a useful little file I like for kind of testing. But this will generate a temporary file path. So I can specify the extension. In my case, I just want to do a text file. And it's basically going to generate a unique temporary file path, which will be in your like temporary directory. Because I don't really care about this file, I could care less where it is. That was going to generate that text file. This will create the text file. So this isn't actually creating the text file. It's just creating the name for my text file and converting it to a path. And then this will create it. This will write data to it. I'm going to close out that reference. And then when I'm done, I want to read that data. So you can see there's this count function. If I don't wire that up, by default, it's just going to go read the entire file. So whether that's one line of text or some massive file, it's going to read everything. If I want to read a specific amount of data, I can pass in basically the number of characters or lines to read. So I can pass in that number. Rarely have I ever seen, much of a need to just read, a specific amount. Usually, right, this is like, I've got some JSON file and I'm reading the whole file, right? And it's not anything massive, so, it doesn't really matter. But you may have a use case where you need to read chunks of data at a time. That would be how you do that. So let's just go wire that in there. So we're going to read all of the data, and we can output the text of the data. And there's also this canceled. That only applies if you didn't wire in a path or a refnum, and it launches the dialog. That way, if the dialog gets canceled, this is going to output a true. So we've kind of got that example put together, and then we'll use the close file function to close out that reference after we've read the data from it. So, sweet. Let's run this VI and see what our text looks like. So just like I expected, we get demo text, and then we move to the next line, and we get demo text 2. So this is really all it takes, for writing to text files. You've kind of got, and when I say text, right? Remember, this function, for example, is called write to text file. It doesn't have to be a .txt file. It can be basically any ASCII file. So it could be a JSON file, it could be a CSV file, it could be, whatever custom format you want. It could be just about anything. By text, what they really just mean is ASCII. It's an ASCII file where, it's like human readable, which they have separate functions for working with binary files, which I'll talk about in a future video. So that's, like I said, going to cover in my experience, these 4 functions work for probably 90% of your use case. Now, there are a couple of useful functions in the advanced file functions. So, for example, I can use the get file position to basically get the position of the cursor in my file, so I can see where I actively am in the file. And I can get some details about the files and whatnot. I can actually set my file position, right? So if I'm opening a file that already has data and I don't want to overwrite that data, I can, for example, tell it that I want the cursor to be at the end of the file, which that one I have used quite a bit. Where I'm appending data to a file that the cursor is not in the right place. I just drop this in and it automatically places my cursor at the end, and then I can insert my new data. So that one I use quite a bit. You can set the file size, permissions, all that. I do use this show and file system quite a bit. This one's kind of handy, and I'll actually drop it down so you can see what it does. But basically, this will pop up the file explorer at the file that you've specified. You can check if the name of a file that you've worked with is going to work across multiple platforms. Move, copy, delete, those are kind of self-explanatory. Flush file, I can create folders, I can list folders, I can check if they exist, etc. So the main things I would say that I use is the get file position, the set file position. I do use the move, copy, delete functions here and there. I use list folder quite a bit as well as create folder. So, it depends on your specific use case. So let's just run this one more time. And I'm just going to show this show and file system because I think it's a really handy VI. And this works with any file. I can pass in any file and it's basically just going to open it up. So let's connect that in. Let's go rerun our VI. So we get our text, and then it's going to launch File Explorer and basically pass it to my temporary file, which you can see has my text in it. So kind of handy, especially after you've generated some files. Sometimes you want to give some people some confirmation that that file was generated. I think popping it up in File Explorer is simple and it's effective. And it's really just dropping this VI in, so it's really simple to add to your code. But so more or less, like I said, that's pretty much working with text files in LabVIEW. We just open or create a file. We've got our reads and our writes, and we close that out when we're done. And that's pretty much it. And that'll work for any type of ASCII file out there. It can be used for CSV files, etc. Hopefully that was helpful for someone. Thanks for watching.
Canon Controls is your gateway to mastering LabVIEW. Dive into programming for data acquisition, industrial communications, and manufacturing automation. Explore how to enhance your projects with cybersecurity best practices. Join the journey to elevate your skills and secure your systems with every episode.